Through more than 2 decades at Kenner and Hasbro, Aaron built worlds, told stories, and designed toys for some of pop culture's biggest names, including Transformers, Batman, Star Wars, and more. Join him as he explores the archives and tells you the stories of the creative process behind your favorite toys. This is the Toy Armada with your host, Aaron Archer.
So we are back again with another Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, and I'm your host, Protoman, and we're going to be stepping away from Energon for a moment because we kind of want to do something that's a little timely and right now in vogue with what's going on with Transformers. We've had 2 new products that are going to be coming out in 2024. Of course, the Transformers Legacy United Voyager class Thundertron that probably is already hitting stores at the time of this recording, as well as the recently revealed Transformers Legacy Universe Voyager class Vector Prime that we'll be getting in 2024 that right now is probably aiming for Q4 2024. But that being said, we kind of want to revisit these 2 characters because they do have a little bit of a special place in terms of Transformer IP development and how characters are created to kind of be a story-driven part of the brand. And we're going to revisit these 2 characters, talk about their original toy releases, their development, everything like that, and even maybe touch on the new stuff too. But first, Aaron Archer, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Excellent, excellent. So we're going to dive into this. So we're going to start with Vector Prime. Vector Prime, you know, this character that you guys conceived very early on. So let's start at the beginning. How did this character come to be? What was the early ideas? And then we'll kind of touch on all the other people that were involved with it as it starts to develop.
Well, Vector Prime and this character came to life because of a story need, primarily. I've talked about the pre-Cybertron pitch of Supercross a little bit at different times, which just a slightly different take on what Cybertron became. It involved a lot of cutting through time and space to collect an ultimate team of Transformers to defeat Unicron, and that was going to take place across Transformer generations. That was a little heady for our management, and probably rightfully so. But what we converted that into the Autobots needing to go to these other Transformer planets with the help of a character to cut through the distance and whatnot and lay all the stakes out. So Vector Prime lived, or that type of character lived in both iterations of the story. He would have been the guy cutting through the realities to go capture the other or team up with the other generations. So he goes all the way back to the whole story concept of bringing a lot of different types of Transformers together. And we needed a time and space type epic person that could communicate in an Autobot sort of way, like a herald of Galactus, but kind of like, hey, there's this Unicron guy coming. Here's what we got to do. So very story function versus we got a new feature or we got to reuse this name or, some of the classic ways that toys might get created.
It sounds, the way that you sell it to me, it sounds very similar to what was, I don't know how much you were involved with the story side of Universe 1.0, like that early Universe line that you guys had that were just pretty much straight up repaints, where there was
absolutely
there was kind of a story element to it also, where it was like, hey, all these different Transformers from different timelines being brought together to fight Unicron. Was it because of that line, or was there? I'm making these parallels here in my mind, but like, was there something with the connection to that, or the idea kind of spurred off from something like that, or because it's that
there
line...
wasn't the main thing I think that you're picking up on, which would have been true, was that we were trying to figure out the universe and trying to figure out how Unicron was more than just somebody who wanted to eat Cybertron. that he had a bigger type of role. So all those things were colliding at the same time. The very early days of me realizing, man, we don't have our ducks in a row with these terms or all the planets or a map or, like this, what became an aligned continuity approach to codify everything. This is the early days of realizing all that stuff is happening.
Well, you mentioned also like kind of figuring it out stuff because, I mean, Vector Prime really was a key to a lot of, actually like the first domino in a lot of ways to all of that falling together because like not long after you create Vector Prime, that whole, like the original 13 as an idea has always been kind of brewing in the background, but never officially. And then when you guys did that DK Transformers Ultimate Guidebook with Simon Furman, that was like the first time the original 13 was officially addressed properly. And I mean, you've said in the past how like you guys use that book to like show to studios and stuff to kind of explain what Transformers is and how important that book was. So it like, in a lot of ways, Vector Prime really was that first domino piece to you guys. Like, let's really build a lore and a universe here and explain things.
I'll take a little aside here. I kept colliding into contradictory information, misinformation, or not convenient information when trying to go, what is this all about? Who are these characters? What does Optimus stand for? Why do they fight? What? Oh, there's 13. Okay, who are they? Oh, we only know 4 of them. All right. What does that mean? I kept, as I became more and more responsible for kind of holding the IP within Hasbro, as we were doing it at that point, not as an archivist, but like, what are we doing? That's when all this stuff started to come about, where it's like, okay, well, now there's an open question mark. There's slots. Who are these other 13? That's something we can fill in. What are all the planets? Okay, we know about a golden age and space bridges. Let's talk about where that went and what did that mean?
And what kind of spurned that drive to kind of like grow? Because, here's Transformers. It's a toy line that Marvel and Hasbro did. And like it's going to have the Marvel comics that has one interpretation. The cartoon is a vastly different storyline and interpretation. Fast forward a few years, more comics, Beast Wars. Beast Wars is pulling from column A and column B. It's talking about Primus, which is comic stuff, but then it's referencing stuff from the cartoon version. So even Beast Wars was kind of like, putting its foot in both, in both ponds. And then you get to the Unicron trilogy. Now it's a brand new universe, and it's like this is a whole other thing. When did you guys really feel, we need to really figure out, like, we need to really like how Star Wars, there's no question with how this story, at least at the time, outside of a few novels, there's no question on what the continuity is and the story and the world and the lore, or Star Trek or any of these other big sci-fi brands. What kind of like, really built that?
It goes back probably to the beginning of my time overall on Transformers, because as I've stated before, when I came on, I was a fan of G1, and I knew it like a kid that read some of the comic books and watched the show. Okay, by no means could I have gone to BotCon and held my own in any way whatsoever. I'd be like, oh yeah, the red and blue one that was the race car. Yeah, Gears or something. I wouldn't have been a knob, but I wouldn't have been impressed. No one would have been impressed. So I did that research through a lot of the books that existed. There were fan-made tomes that covered every episode of the series, and really, no pictures, just somebody's research project. All the little guidebooks of the different old names and pictures of the gear and everything. I was doing this research project. And then it's the beginning a little bit of being able to go online and do some research too. And you can imagine me finding a lot of layers of information, that at times contradict or don't nest properly. And, we obviously talk about the cartoon and the comics not matching, but now think generationally at not matching. And then, like you say, Beast Wars comes in, and what does that mean? And So by the time I got on the brand, we had been, 2.5 generations deep, let's say. You could call it G1, Beast Wars, and then all other, whatever Animorphs was, whatever Machine Wars was, whatever things happen. And it was like, you're going to create a brand new expression to launch this thing, capture people's imagination again, get back to basics. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of different style of information. Okay, now we're going to partner with outside vendors. And they're going to create content for comic books and this, that, and the other. And we would get back stuff that either Hasbro didn't like because it wasn't appropriate, and or things that might be confusing or too big for the IP.
When you say, I'm kind of curious, when you say inappropriate, like, could you give me some examples of something they would, like,
I'm not going
down?
Just something that wasn't part of the overall business plan of Hasbro.
I'm not looking for like inappropriate, like racy.
Yeah, but... not racy like that. More like, the death of Optimus. No, you're not.
Okay,
you're not writing that story. Like that kind of inappropriate for positive business. In any and all ways. Sometimes that would include a gun pointed towards the viewer on a comic book cover that would have to get changed, but that would be much rare. That stuff that would be talking about. So I was left with a lot of questions myself and a lot of things that we could, I guess, explain to have a full understanding of our brand. Because what was really happening is internally, you have the business people who might be there for a certain length of time, committed to these properties, that would also come in and out. And they would only know what they knew from the presentations. They're not watching the cartoons. They're never reading a comic book. Mm-hmm. So I had to very firmly direct what we are communicating, with the marketing partners and stuff as well. But like to even our internal people, both management and then partners like a Tactics or Built to Rule, people doing things internally, what we are trying to do. Because if everybody just ran around making transforming robots and making this bio for Optimus here and this bio for Optimus Minor over here, it could get very confusing. And I was experiencing that within the building of either needing to not confuse people or not have people get confused. So I started realizing that there were things to codify and or opportunities to, I always use the term lash down these like loose concepts. Some sort of boat metaphor there, but
but you
things that
right.
are just floating out there. The 13,
that was
that's an opportunity.
That was something that was a big problem even early on in the brand. Like something as simple as who created the Constructicons? Were they created on Earth? Were they on Cybertron and they created Megatron? There was, within just the cartoon, there was contradictions. Then you go to the comic version. Oh, well, they were created on Earth. So because there's so many origins, because there's so many different interpretations and contradictions and retcons within their own cartoon, because no one was really paying attention. One guy is, David Wise is writing these episodes of G1, and then they bring in another guy and he writes these episodes, but he didn't watch the David Wise episodes, so he doesn't know. And no one's really given a Bible back then in the way it is today. So it's kind of, that existed back then. You can
imagine from the fandom. I mean, I was left with all these scattered, flashcards just all over the room that all had one little bit of information. That was accurate didn't know for that part,
And you didn't even know if it was accurate at all sometimes, because sometimes I use the term fanon, which is like the canon in the mind of a fan. Sometimes that trickles into fact incorrectly, and then it just kind of permeates over time.
So all that stuff was basically the impetus for this kind of thinking. And we kept getting people who would just go to Wikipedia and want to start writing a comic book, and it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That Optimus story is not, from some other part of the lore, not what we're trying to do now, and so that it became more and more important to have some sort of way to share what we wanted as a brand managers of the franchise versus even the passion of some of the creators, right? Some people did want to write, pretty epic, wild things. And it's like, well, that we're not trying to do that yet. We're still building our brand here.
Well, you don't burn it away all that quickly, and you have to look long form in a lot of ways. I mean, look at even the Unicron trilogy and how it slowly builds, and then it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, in terms of how a story is told. And I mean, this kind of like then rolls around back here. So yeah, Vector Prime. Here's this concept that you guys are putting together. How is this character created to drive the story forward in this third part of this trilogy?
Yeah. So his initial concept was that he was somehow going to be the controller of, or this character was going to be the controller of time and space. That is why he was designed with clock-like gears and mechanism, because he's a time machine. And the two swords that he was supposed to have represent like a clock arm, the two clock arms, and that he would cut through, the reality of time and space around him to enter into other Transformer realities. So that was the original need for the character. As we thought about that seemed pretty epic. That seemed like a skill set that no other Transformer seems to have. So are we going too far? Right? You got to be fair. And that's when it was like, well, what if this guy is even bigger than Autobot Decepticon? What if he's one of the 13? Then we can get away with a god power, So the idea of the 13 existed even back in those early 2003, 2004 pitches? I was always enamored with that.
Okay.
That goes to my personal interest in world myth and mythology and, lost tribes of Roanoke or lost tribes of Judaism or just, what lost Roman legions in the Sahara. I just like these ideas.
Well, now that you mention that, one part of Vector Prime's visual is that he has a very almost Egyptian kind of design to him in a lot of ways, with, again, those ancient kind of things. Was that purposeful? Was like, even his head, like his head has a very kind of pharaoh kind of crest to it. I mean, obviously people make the connection to the Autobot emblem being upside down with his head sculpt and everything, but just overall, like he has a very Egyptian kind of look to him. Was that purposeful? We wanted him to look ancient and kind of built differently than anything we'd seen before, without him being, weird looking. So that's what the clock, all the scribe detail and all that clock detail was going for. And then, his head has a bit of an Egyptian vibe to it. It was the Autobot logo at one point, and that was just a little too on the nose for Hasbro. We didn't want to define that logo on a character forever. There's actually some pre-production stuff that Don Figueroa did early.
Yeah, there's images of it. Yeah, and then the face was going to open up like it was a shield kind of thing. He
had a bit of like a hunch, almost kind of like how movie Jetfire was depicted, like in terms much more older kind of character. And then, of course, obviously you guys cleaned it up more and made it to what the design is today.
Yeah, so designer friend of mine, Chris Woods, did a lot of work on that one for me. I gave him some rough sketches in the image board of, the Swiss watches and all that stuff, and the Sith Infiltrator was obviously part of the visual of the alt mode. But I want to take a half step back into the story world of this for a second.
Go ahead.
Because we're talking about these 13 and all this, and now I need to be clear. I'm running a bit of the creative within the company. I'm helping all the decisions make sense for everybody involved, licensing teams, the marketing team. And it's easy to go, okay, this guy's now part of the 13, and but I felt the need to call up Simon and say, ask him what his intentions were. This is a concept that was not instituted at Hasbro, right? So what were you trying to do here, Simon? And do you have future plans for it? And how do we build it together and I not step on anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's fair maintenance of IP. And, to his credit, Simon has done a lot of work in his long career, a lot of it with licensed brands. And he very humbly and smartly, I think, the right answer. He's just like, Aaron, you guys can do whatever you need to do. I play in your sandbox. I'm happy to have played in your sandbox. Here's what I was thinking, but the idea of the 13 is the writer's concept of when I need it, there's something there I can use. And so there is no plan for any of that until it's needed. And if you have a need, figure it out. And so very cool to have that conversation. And so I felt fine to, I think I roughed out what I thought I was going to do with him as far as each one of the ones we'll identify will be part of the trope of Transformers, whether it's a beast or a combiner or a mini thing, So, and he thought that was a good way to fill out the rest of them, and I went to work from there on that.
Because initially none of that was ever hard. Like, there was rumblings. Oh, maybe Alpha Trion's part of that. Oh,
Liege Maximo,
like
Alpha Trion.
Anyone who was an old
Megatronus,
Transformer,
I think, was.
Yeah, well, the Fallen was like
the Fallen,
an early one.
Yeah.
That like before we had Megatronus, because you guys the first time we even learned about Megatronus was through you and you guys through BotCon. You did a panel where you showed here's the Fallen and then here's Megatron. I think it was at the time when you guys were promoting I think it was one of the early books, maybe the Transformers Vault. I think it was at the time. You guys were showing that off, and. But I just want to mention like in Simon's case, like Simon, his 13, what it was is when he was doing stuff with BotCon, he initially had this whole thing where it's like, well, there's like the 12 Zodiacs, right? And then and then the 13th one will be whatever's the Matrix Bearer at the time. And so he had like an early concept of that with these 12 Zodiacs and Greek mythology. Again, you're pulling from that ancient kind of gods and all of that, and then literally again. Everything kind of gets sharpened up and smoothed out better, and it's not just a splintered piece of wood. Now it's something that's smooth and looks nice. And then you have what is the 13 today, which, in all honesty, it took a decade of figuring it out from its first early conception to what I'd like to say, the Covenant of Primus, which pretty much is now that definitive version of those characters.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that was another thing. These aren't the most important aspect of the brand from a kid's standpoint, right?
From a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, they're kind of like a very deep kind of layer to the overall fandom, and then as they push them, certainly in the future coming up, I hope there's some content around them, because I do feel like they're not the focus of the story and probably shouldn't be. They're too much.
I've always looked at it in the same way that you could look at Marvel and Spider-Man. This ground level kid taking photographs is the face of the brand. We're not talking about the Beyonder, or the gods of the cosmic universe of Marvel. Like, they're not the faces of the brand. No one's talking about the in-betweener, the collector and stuff like that, unless you're like maybe a big Thanos reader or something. But so it makes sense that these characters could exist. They're super powerful, all important, the beginnings of the universe and everything. But yeah, they aren't the face of the brand. They're important from a lore standpoint if you go that extra layer as a fan and deep dive into that. But I think any brand is kind of guilty of that. There's always that, who started the Jedis? We don't know. We really don't know in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and you think you want to know, but sometimes you don't really care.
But you're still
characters you're invested in. You're invested in the
you're
concept.
still selling 12 more Vader figures than that one guy who started the Jedis, or the Sith or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's all these different brands. They always have that deeper layer. And that deeper layer, I think, it exists for the hardcore fans. After we've gotten you've bought the toys. Now you've watched the show. Now you've read the comics. Now you go deeper. And here's the extra layers. I think it's almost like it exists there for, there's more here. And it's deeper. That's what I think maybe, because it's almost like an unknown, it keeps people interested and invested.
I always see.
Well, I was going to say, because think about, we're talking Vector Prime, that's 2003, 2004. We wouldn't get that Covenant of Primus book until, 2015, 14? So it took something like that. It took a good 10 years before this was all finally realized. And that's kind of the beauty of it. I call it the Wolverine syndrome, which is because there's so much mystery there, it's almost what kept people intrigued from the hardcore standpoint all those years. But at the end of the day, you're still selling Optimus Prime toys, Bumblebee toys. Like that's what's really moving the brand ahead, is what's there in the face of the fans that's known, But from the hardcore standpoint, it's that's how I've always compartmentalized.
Yeah. Another way to look at this same predicament is if you're a fan or familiar at all with Greek mythology, Zeus and all of them are the biggest deals, but before them, they overcame the Titans, Saturn and all that. So, but we don't cover that battle, right? That's a thing in the past of even the epic gods.
The Battle of Mount Olympus,
Yeah, so I feel like the 13 are kind of in that same kind of sphere of, Optimus is like Zeus to me, but before him, there's these things.
One way to compare it is, it's like the Transformers Generation 1 story is the Roman battles with Caesar and everything and all of that politics. And above all of that is the gods, which we never talk about because it's almost impossible to comprehend. It's on a different plane of existence. But it happened, at least in their own telling of the story. You ask any Roman back then, of course Zeus is real and all of this. So, or in the case of Greek mythology, but so it's something where, to me, there's always been an intrigue of it. And then when you bring because again, up to that point, none of those elements have ever been brought in there. Again, Alpha Trion existed before as this ancient Cybertronian, but it really was the first time outside of the Fallen and the Dreamwave comic books that an element of that was really brought into the main fiction of a cartoon. And went like, go ahead.
It found its way into Prime in that legendary sense, right?
Yeah.
Which was probably the best way to use it. You don't have to see too much to know how it impacted. So it was cool to get that in there, and it did make its way into some of the books, so.
What I wanted to also, I didn't find the right place to put this in, but like the name Vector Prime, first of all, the Vector part, was that because of Vector Sigma with Transformers, or does the Vector element spawn from somewhere else? Where did that Vector part come from?
I think it sounded cool.
Okay, so it wasn't Vector Sigma. I just wanted to...
I don't think it was.
Okay.
I just like that word. I remember the car from the 80s.
The Vector, yeah.
Yeah, right? So, insert obscure photo of goofy-looking car
Yeah,
here.
that's exactly. I'm already making a note to myself.
I did not remember that it was a Star Wars book at the time.
Oh, that I didn't know. Okay.
So it is a Star Wars novel that I think covers a little bit of the origin of Beyond the Outer Rim.
Okay.
So I think I think I was aware of the book, but forgot about it, kind of thing, and used the same name, not intentional. But
the choice of making him Prime on top of that, we haven't up to that point, attaching Prime to the end of a character's name was leadership. That was pretty much the only established thing. There wasn't like, the 13s are all Primes, because again, Alpha Trion, the Fallen, they didn't have Prime at the end, at least initially. So where did that putting Prime to Vector Prime, where did that come from?
Yeah, well, I think we knew internally he was going to be an epic character, and I've talked at different points at these early days. We're trying to get back to basics. I've talked about not wanting to use Hot Rod or Rodimus, and a few other Ultra Magnus. Anybody that would question the leadership of Optimus was not something we were eagerly looking to get into at the time. We were still living with the residue of the movie in people's philosophical minds. Don't kill the heroes was, and make the heroes was kind of a subconscious way to think about it. So when we needed to bring in this epic level character, giving him the Prime name automatically put him at a higher level than we're used And therefore, it subconsciously told you he must be important.
And interestingly also, because up to that point, Japan was always going with Convoy. Even in the Japanese version of Cybertron, it was Nitro Convoy, Flame Convoy. But yet this one was Prime. Like, it was Vector Prime in America, it was Vector Prime in Japan. So there was some kind of solidification that there's something unique about this character as opposed to all the others that either have had that label or before or after.
So the Vector Prime name, conveys the importance of the character, certainly seeds him in as some sort of thing that you need to know about, and it was a easy shorthand to do that versus coming in without that name and listen to me, let me tell you, you need to do this. With him being a Prime, it kind of made it easier for the Autobots to go, oh, okay,
Yeah.
But we didn't want to use that Prime name a lot. We didn't want to overuse it, but in this case, it was the right opportunity.
So when we get into the figure itself, so we have a few different designers attached to it. We have Don Figueroa that did the early sketches. We have your friend Mr. Wood, who also was going back and forth with him, like you said. And then we also have listed here Aaron Archer, Eric Siebeneller as designers on the toy, Takashi Kuniharu-san from Takara, as well as Hirofumi Ichigawa, who did detailing. Is there anyone else that I'm leaving out here on the figure itself or the designs that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this gives you a good glimpse at the efforts we would go through to develop the right look for the characters we were creating. I know I did an image board with Swiss watches and this, that, and the other. Chris took that to a level. Don was working on the heads a little bit more. Eric was working on the spaceship after we got the first version back. We needed some refinement to get it away from the Sith Infiltrator vibe. And so that's when Eric did some overlays on the vehicle. So this is toy design, and this is classic character design when you have a big corporation. A lot of people are going to touch them, and this speaks to the whole brand. When you meet all the creatives that work on these things, we all do something. We all had a comment in a meeting, a comment on color, a little aid here, a sketch. It's hard to. No one person designs toys, particularly Transformers, right? So I'm always quick to make sure that Takara gets some sort of credit because they do their part. Hasbro does its part. But this character particularly, you can see the reach just to get one character done.
The choice to make him a Voyager class as opposed to a leader, because he was going to be an important character. And if you look at that first wave of Cybertron, you have the big Starscream toy, and then the leader price point at that point is just the Optimus and the Megatron, rightfully so. But the choice to not put him in that leader price point, wanted to keep him more in the Voyager. Was there a strategic decision behind that? Fill out the Voyager price point? Or did you just not want to make this important character so expensive?
Yeah, it was probably that. We probably wanted to put the giant characters in those bigger spots from the giant planet, or
especially later on, yeah.
And it was more accessible at that price point at the time. I loved the whatever the $15 to $22 zone was at any given time in Transformers. Quite honestly, Beast Wars through the Unicron trilogy. Those are all great toys, and maybe towards the end.
In June of 2005, according to Walmart, he was a $19.99 toy, the Voyager class.
Yeah.
We are so far away from that today, but back then a Voyager price point, $19.99. So, and again, he had the sound gimmick, he had the plug, he had the translucent plastics.
Had a mini-con.
We totally forgot to talk about Safeguard, aka Root in Japan. He had the mini-con too.
Yep.
Very nice. Actually, probably a good time to mention that. Why the choice to include a mini-con with him when the mini-con concept being packaged with characters have really been phased out since, Cybertron brings that back a little bit, but Energon kind of abandoned it outside of this and that.
Yep. Did we do the second Star Saber in Energon, or was that in?
Yeah, you had a few.
The
things.
yellow redeck or kind of.
You had the
remold.
Energon Saber.
Yeah,
a remold called the Energon Saber. You had obviously because some of the Armada toys were repainted in Energon, so obviously their mini cons carried over because of that. But outside of
as a whole. As a whole, the concept that we were trying to convey there was if we add some parts of the lore, they can't just disappear, right? So I found it very weird anytime, hey, it's all about minicons, and then 2 years later you never see another minicon in the franchise or on the planet again. That doesn't ring true to me. So if we added these things to the lore, but they weren't as focused, or that story had been, let's say, settled, it didn't mean we couldn't have these things pop up, because they are part of the universe, and we did feel pretty prideful of them. They had done good business. We wanted to probably maintain the Minicon name. Could be a good reason as well. Mm-hmm. So when he was going to get a gun, and maybe we talked about it being transforming, or nesting the sword, and maybe we nest the gun, it was like, well, let's make him a Minicon. Probably came up. So it's really about our effort to say, okay, if we're building these continuities over and over and over, let's own up to it. Let's not just have it be the fashion of the week, and the ideas linger. That's all.
Okay, that's why it's very interesting, because here's this ancient character, and he also has a mini-con, and mini-cons also had kind of a little bit of a mysterious origin initially, so nice to bring that forward. Another thing too, so when it comes to, he had a future repaint afterwards, which was more like a yellowish kind of color scheme. I have here written down that during the early deco layouts, that was actually going to be his color scheme. And then you guys settled on the more whites with browns afterwards. Is that true?
I
was going to be more of
I don't recall.
Like yellow.
I don't know the order. He was supposed to. At one point, he was going to be golden.
Okay, that's why the yellowish golden. There you go.
Yeah, he was going to be more shiny and shimmery because he was an ancient Transformer.
That kind of also matches up again more with the Egyptian thing, because a lot of Egyptian statues and stuff, before they were all tarnished, were always emblazoned in gold.
In my headcanon, he was shimmery, shiny gold at some point, like you see in the Covenant book. He is gold in that book.
That's true, yeah.
And his VM has worn off over the millenniums,
There you
and
go.
That's why he's white and brown now, because the chrome has flaked off of him.
Okay, there you go. So, well, now because that's why, because afterwards you then had that yellow version, which was called Galaxy Force Vector Prime, and there never really was a strong established reasoning for that. Obviously, there was explanations of, the early CG mock-ups when they were working on the show, he was originally yellow, and then it became the whitish gray that we're familiar with today. So, okay, that's interesting. That builds it a little bit right there. Gives some explanation. Aside from that, is there anything else that you want to really bring up about Vector Prime, that, like, from his creation and how important he was to building around an IP, before we move on to our next guy?
No, just for me as a creative person within the building, he just represented, like you said, almost not not the internal launch pad, but certainly was the beginning of you guys seeing that we were thinking bigger at times and stuff. So for me, it was one of the first times that I got to see some of that come to life, like literally adding to the lore, not just a random name, but bringing something that was going to hopefully stand the test of time through.
Well, it was like when you had Armada, you brought back Unicron proper. When you had Energon, that was the opportunity to bring back some of those classic trademarks and names, the concept of combiners with Devastator and the aerial bots and Scorponok and even out the Quintessons, like all of those classic names also kind of came back with Energon. And then Cybertron was like now, and especially Cybertron, we're a year and a half away from the Michael Bay movie. So now this is going to be sci-fi. Now this is going to be big pop culture. And you have this Cybertron line that's, well, we're going to bring back the ancient stuff. We're going to bring back the gods. Primus is in this. There's going to be a Primus toy. There's going to be a transforming Cybertron. And so you're building up like the ancient past, the history, the lore of this brand. And then when Cybertron is over in 2006, here comes 2007. And then, you guys didn't predict it. I mean, it's like any company, it would be nice if the movie succeeds and makes millions of dollars. But who knows where it would have went. But it was very good that the movie comes out. It builds this fan base that's even bigger than it ever was up to that point. And now they have all this stuff that they could pull from deeper lore if you want to build forward now. Because, again, when you look at the movie that came after 2007, Revenge of the Fallen, you're building up from something you guys created with that first domino with Vector Prime. So the next thing we're going to dive into is Thundertron from Transformers Prime. So here's another one that is a character that you guys created that had a bigger purpose than what the toy line intended. He didn't get much fiction outside of novels and a few comic pages here and there. But he did have a big purpose when he was being put together. So tell me about Thundertron, who he is, what he is, and what was the intent.
Yeah, so I kind of hinted at it a little earlier when I was talking about the space bridges. So as we're thinking all this logic through with the aligned continuity and or just the universe that we want to have Transformers sit in going forward, or at least communicate to new partners that are telling stories where there are interesting bits and all of this. One of the things that would come up from time to time, it wasn't a push exactly, but are there other factions, was always coming up. So you can go down the line of how many different factions have been created over the years. But they largely fall under Autobot or Decepticon, even if they are kind of separate factions.
Like sub-factions.
Yeah, sub-factions, I guess we'd call them.
Yeah.
But I'm also really into history as a person, and the different stories of colonization and or people being shipwrecked on islands and just what happens with all of that. And we wanted to expand the universe, so we wanted to create a new like a different allegiance separate from Autobot and Decepticon. We had the opportunity to get into what happened on the far end of those space bridges was really the first question. So the Golden Age we talk about from a story standpoint, more in the comics and whatnot. And there was this great time where Transformer life was going all across the universe. They created space bridges and commerce, and they populated other planets. We know this from going back to the first movie and beyond, that there is Cybertronian life throughout the cosmos. Okay, now we added the idea that there's a Quintus guy that's like spreading sparks around and stuff like that. That comes later. But like, if you had these space bridges and you strung them together and you could go further and further and further and further away from Cybertron, and you are sharing goods and services and opportunities, and then one day the Golden Age ends, right? There's some catastrophe, the war starts, what have you, and the far end of those space bridges now are cut off. And what would that story look like? That was the question. What would happen if I got hooked on Cybertronian stuff and one day it's all cut off and my planet needs all that stuff, or I don't like how that turned my planet into what it turned into. I want revenge, or I'm going to go figure it out, and that was the original idea in this overall line continuity concept of what are the other planets about. We obviously hit Velocitron and Gigatron and these different places, but let's create some other ones with some really unique type of characters. So our story, real simply, was that he was a leader of let's call it a planet that was more in balance overall. The space bridges are bringing new Cybertronian stuff all the time. This happens over millions of generations also, right? It's not just instantly. So, and they get used to having the Cybertronian stuff. They lose a little bit of touch with their more nature balance attitude, and then the space bridges close. And now his planet is in confusion, and he is not happy. And so our story was like, what happens when this charismatic Shaka Zulu type character, maybe, in the original days, wants to take the vehicles that were there and go back to the host country and cause trouble. And that was the origin of this kind of guy. And then as he got onto that spaceship to go attack Cybertron, he became the pirate. And that's where that whole the taking of the ship concept of the tidal wave and all of that comes from that then.
When this figure was being put together, was this with the intention of him being in the show at some point, or because it's something where you put a lot of weight there right away on this one toy, and it's like, was this all planned, at some point, or was it like we made this figure and then we built the lore afterwards? Like, did the chicken come before the egg? Or?
We had the intention of putting it into IP in a book form or something. It was not a toy first. Okay. And it was not designed for Prime. Nobody related to Prime had anything to do with this character.
Okay.
This was all Hasbro, Rhode Island internal. It just needed to sit somewhere when it got released, and they put it under that banner. So he never he doesn't have a connection to the Prime continuity show, as far as the people who worked on that show are aware.
Okay, because we have early concepts by Emiliano, who did that.
Yep.
Toy designed by Joe Kide and Bill Rawry. Mark Mayer, who we're very familiar with today at Hasbro, but he did the deco layout for him.
So this toy was originally a Hong Kong or Chinese kind of exclusive line that we were doing over there in those black boxes.
The GDO stuff.
Yeah.
Talking about. Yeah.
So it was all in this mix of we want to create unique characters for China, or the collector market in Asia, I should say. And that's where this unique character came up. We had been working on him for the story, and they were looking for a dynamic new toy thing that wasn't, your standard thing. And that's
something that was unique.
That's how the kind of these two things got put together, and then timing, it got put under the Prime banner. But I'm kind of glad it did. Intended, yeah, I mean, otherwise,
but it was never intended to be a Prime product, under that.
No.
Under that label. Okay, interesting.
No, he's got different cost constraints and.
I was about to mention
it's everything. It's a whole different one-off.
It's a very packed toy.
Yeah.
Crazy articulation, a lot of translucent plastic light-up gimmicks. The fact that it could do the peg leg.
Yeah.
It didn't have to do that. So that's extra cost of tooling and everything right there that didn't have to be there. So it's and again, all of that under a Voyager price point in 2012. So it was very interesting item. And again, it really stands out from all the others. I mean, I have it in display in my Prime collection, And yeah, he's a very weird.
I would put him more
kind of design
in line with the Wreckers, or those kind of independent Transformer factions.
Well, especially because his character already, the way you guys wrote him was very like, screw Cybertron.
Yeah, we were very we like this idea, like, I don't know if this gets too political, but in the world there have been places where people have colonized, and what if the people that were there found a way, and or were so ticked off at what happened to them that they found a way at some point to go back to the original country and take care of business, give them a piece of their mind, whether that would be war or what, I don't know, but hey, this wasn't right. We're here to take care of, I like that concept. I thought that was an interesting motivation for a guy to be passionately angry at everything Cybertronian. He would eagerly mess up Starscream as easily he would Ironhide. And that was a dynamic that we had never seen before. And that's what we were really going after, like this a person that just really hated Cybertronians particularly. You guys set up this pipeline my people got hooked on and messed everything up. I'm pissed, Oh,
and again, Transformers is a brand that is all about war, and a big part of war is taking over place, colonizing places. And we've seen it in small pieces. Like you have in the case of, let's say, the Japanese Headmasters anime that came out in 1987, where it was like, what were the Headmasters? Well, these were a group of people that escaped Cybertron during the war, established themselves on another planet, and then after millions of years of being on that planet, came back, and in the case of the Decepticon side of it, with Scorponok, caused trouble,
I believe in a infinite transformational universe in this property. Earth is just one little drop in the story bucket to me.
Well, considering the amount of time that passes, like between just ignoring everything else that's bookended of it, between the Ark crashing 4 million years ago and then waking up in 1984, the amount of stories that could be told there, let alone, again, because these are spacefaring beings that are immortal because they're robots, there's a billion stories that could be told from that.
How
Beast
long
Wars
was Wheelie marooned on that planet?
Oh, God knows. Exactly. And the stories that could be told there, and his family, and when did that happen?
And I loved to bring that kind of big overview of the stories. I'm not the type of person that cared about the words that came out of their mouth. That's not the writing I do, but I like the idea of building characters for need or opportunity, and that's what both the guys we've talked about today do really well.
And they do a good job too, because there's two sides of the toy world. There's, you want to create great product that attracts an audience to want to make a purchase, be it because it's colorful, of its play pattern, of its value. There's many different reasons why a person buys a toy, be it the hardcore fan or a child or a parent. And then you have items that, and Transformers and G.I. Joe were very much this, where there was items that you bought it not because of its play pattern or its appeal visually or its value or anything, but because of its lore, because of its story, because of what there is there. And that's what worked for Transformers, was you wanted these characters because of the connection that you made with the story with that. And this way was almost, I don't want to say backwards because that sounds negative, but it's like you guys created this huge lore that was divorced from the mainstream media at the time.
Sure.
But you were creating this whole thing, and then you plop this character in the Prime line, which now it sounds like it wasn't ever intended to begin there. And people were intrigued by it because they're like, who's this guy? And he has this unique faction logo too, which is like the pirate, Autobot logo kind of fusion.
Yeah. Well,
in green.
I mentioned this in my live the other week. They're doing Tidal Wave. They're doing Cannonball. They're doing Thundertron. Those were all characters in the pitch for this story that I told. I'm going to keep some of these other names to myself, but there's a few others. If they come out with that, I'm curious if they're going to tell that story.
There's a strong. Well, it sounds like
there's some. I mean, because I don't know.
Walmart does have the Star Seekers kind of as a thing penned for them to come out, and it's definitely maybe not something we'll see in the comics, but it is definitely something that, at least in a toy-only kind of fiction, they're kind of building up. There's been a lot of that recently with Hasbro, where they'll go to some of their retail partners and go, hey, we got this, like we saw it with Amazon, where it's like, hey, we got these guys called the Wreckers, and here's this story and all that, and we're going to build a whole subline exclusive to your retail of this story. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening, where you have
you could do a whole pirate thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, they did it initially with Walmart with Velocitron. Hey, we got this racing planet.
Exactly.
And all of these guys are racers, and as a result, we have all this unique characters and product that we could bring to that. And as a result, and that's how they sell it into these retailers. And it's something where we're kind of seeing that now with Thundertron, with the Star Seekers and everything through Walmart currently.
So let me go back a half step. When we were developing that planet, obviously we had it very much like a nature balance. So it was kind of savannas and open fields, and that's why we went with the lion as a theme. King of the jungle.
Okay, interesting.
King of this planet.
I was gonna ask that. Yeah, like why go with? Okay, so that makes
pretty,
sense.
So it's pretty on the nose there as far as that goes.
Okay.
Okay. We didn't want a Beast Wars lion, so that's why he's blue and silver. This Cybertronian planet has evolved the way it's evolved, right? So they look more like Zoids or something. And that's why he looks the way he looks and is the way he is. The name Thundertron I did in a very goofy protection and or defense concept. Thundercats were coming out, and Voltron was also in the zeitgeist then. So Thundertron is my way of sitting a little bit on terms from other brands.
Well, when you have two that sound so familiar.
Yeah.
The Tron of Voltron, the Thunder of Thundercats. Thundercats at the time, I'd want to say, was Bandai was doing that line.
Yeah.
And Voltron, well, I mean, it was before.
Voltron comes and goes, yeah.
Yeah, I think last thing was Trendmaster was doing the third dimension stuff, but it does come and go.
So
and
that's where that goofy name came from. I think it's a fine name. I don't know if it's a great name, but
it's very Transformers.
Yeah, exactly. It is a Transformer name.
It's a very Transformers name. There's been plenty of Thunders in Transformers, from Thundercracker to
Yep.
And then you have stuff like Trons. You just added to every single one from Megatron onward. But it's a very Transformer sounding name, and to do something like that where it also incorporates two rival toy brands to kind of, like you said, to protect, it makes sense. You guys have done that in the past with Machine Robo and
other stuff.
It's
just a way to, if you can get that if you can clear it, it might hurt the competition from using the word thunder in something, or, I mean, it wasn't that tactical, but that's how we got there.
Well, especially like if Thundercats wants to do something that's Thundertron.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's stopping them unless you do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So if they made like a Thundercats Lion-O robot, and they want to go that route, in the same way that, Ninja Turtles has a character named Metalhead, and there's a G.I. Joe character named Metalhead, so you have to sometimes protect your IP so someone else doesn't use a name and create brand confusion. Yeah. So it makes sense. Yeah. This toy also, just to bring up, got a few repaints afterwards because it was a pretty packed toy and very interesting. The Japanese side of Transformers Prime did a Lio Prime repaint. They then did the Go-Go Prime repaint through their Go-Go Transformers line. Bakon did an Alpha Trizer from it, which was actually quite a fantastic figure. If you could get that cheaply, go out of your way to pick that one up. Kind of like the final form of Cheetor is using that mold. An Alpha Trion Cheetor, if you will, at the end of Transformers history. So very cool use of that. Again, it's a very unique figure.
Well, I think I'm just going to add to that. Like, you saw all those options, you know, an exclusive here and there, a couple redecos, certainly in Japan. We made the tooling for this Chinese exclusive opportunity. It wasn't, to your point, a character in the IP, so he wasn't like getting driven at a high rate of production in the shipper boxes. So they had ample tooling on a finished item that didn't have any commitments to be able to do all those different things, because it's a great mold, and it was underutilized as far as in the traditional model of Transformers up until that time.
Yeah, it was used for, like I said, the Prime version that we're talking about. It got 2 Japanese releases and 2 different decos, and then it was a Bakon exclusive, and that was it. And only now recently through Transformers Legacy United is the character being revisited. And like you said before, because of some of the other products that are currently also in that 2024 lineup that are lining up here properly for storytelling purposes, that maybe we might expect some other characters in the future on top of just the Cannonball Balls and a few others.
I love the character. I love that whole story. I had a good run a few years where we were trying to figure out all this IP stories and what happened to Space Bridges and this, that, and the other. I'm pleasantly surprised that it's even still around to be remade, and I hope that, like I say often, you know, all these things, these elements that we created were assets to be deployed when needed or not. It's nice to know that they are figuring out how to use some of them, because that guy was definitely underutilized for his potential. But I am shocked at the same time that a pretty obscure decision we made for a project that was going on then and not now is getting a second look, which is, you know, is cool.
I feel that Transformers right now is going through late stage creativity in that you have Generation 1 that ran for 8 years, and they went through their late stage creativity. It's Pretenders, it's Headmasters, Target Masters, Action Masters, and then you have Beast Wars, and that's the fresh, it's new, and then it goes through its late stage creativity. Well, Beast Machines, what are we doing here? You know, like, yeah. We're not. It's like, what is the sell point? It's just really ugly looking animals. That's really about it, and a lot of translucent plastic. I
and really a lot of non-vehicle looking vehicles.
Yeah, it was, you know, but that's the late stage creativity where it's like, where are we at now at this point? And I feel that, and look, even at Unicron Trilogy, where it's like, it's mini-cons, it's this, like, you guys at least kept gimmicks up, but then by the time you got to Prime, it's just vehicles transforming, you know, and that's the biggest flaw with Transformers Prime was that, where it's that late stage creativity. What I feel is happening now with the current team is they're just kind of going like, what we're doing is we're selling nostalgia. We're selling, but you could only sell Bumblebee so many times, you know, and he still will be there. They'll still find a way to put a Bumblebee in a price point somewhere, but they have to go, who else could we do? We need to do stuff that's fresh. Yeah. And if they have to go all the way back to 2012, which, as crazy as it sounds, is over a decade ago, you know, like we're going on 13 years now since that toy came out. If they have to go back 13 years and pull up this one character to have something fresh again, and again, when it's 13 years is a long time. Oh, sure. There's kids that are 7 that might buy this, that weren't even alive when this figure came out, the original. There's kids that are 13 that were barely born when this figure came out, the original. And then there's going to be the hardcore fans that were 5 when the original came out and will have nostalgia for it because they remember that blue lion when they were a kid.
Or
they
just
weren't
people
able to
that
get it.
like lions or beasts.
There you go.
Period. Yeah.
So it's something where it's that late stage creativity where they go, well, we've done everything we can at this point. So, hey guys, a quick edit note. So we're going to cut it off right here. Me and Aaron, after this point, go on for another hour or so talking about the industry, how it could survive in the long term, changes that would have to be done to do that. Whole bunch of like going into the weeds and really deep into the woods in a lot of ways of what's going on with the toy industry in relation to Transformers and everything. So that segment we're going to release separately. Has nothing to do with what we talked about just before now, so we're going to try to keep that as a separate segment and expect that released in the very near future. But thank you for listening to the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer. That's all we got today. And as always, leave your comments down below. Let us know what you think. And we'll talk to you in the near future.